Okay, everyone, David Shurter has graciously agreed to join me once again because I had several subscribers who sort of hit me with a lot of questions about Ted Gunderson and DeCamp and why David had made the statements he did, that they were basically controlled opposition. They pretended to expose the Franklin Coverup, but really didn't do that. Although there's also some interesting comments that David has about what happened toward the end of each of their lives, because they're both dead now. Gunderson died in 2011, and DeCamp died last year in 2017. So without further ado, guys, I'm going to let David sort of take over and let him sort of address this whole topic of Ted Gunderson and DeCamp. Go ahead, David.
Hey, thanks. What I'm going to say is going to be difficult for a lot of people to hear, especially because this whole situation has been based on personalities for years. We've been told that Ted Gunderson and John DeCamp were heroes, and I have completely a different perspective. You have to understand that I knew personally both of these men, personally interacted with them. And so I'm not just speaking from opinion, I'm talking my personal experience with them. Which one do you want me to deal with first, Ted or John?
Let's go with Ted Gunderson first, and then you can go to John DeCamp.
Okay, Ted Gunderson and I talked a lot at the very beginning. I obviously reached out to him right when I started investigating the Franklin Credit Union. I followed the quote unquote heroes of this as well. So I reached out to Gunderson first. Ted was an enigma, and that's the easiest way to put it. He was very nice. He kind of reminded me of like a fatherly figure. He always referred to me as a great American. Constantly, and I talked to him a lot at the very beginning. The issue that I got from Ted was that he was taking what I was saying and telling the bad guys. I was fighting a lot with Noreen Gosh, who is the mother of Johnny Gosh. I find her to be incredibly fake, incredibly false. She knows information about her son's disappearance, like the three brothers that supposedly were involved with her son's abduction were the Aquasino brothers. They lived right across the street and were good friends with my older siblings. Again, my older sister was 16 years older than I was. My brother was 14 years older than I was, and Kathy was 12 years older than I was. And so they were all in my siblings' age group. They worked down at the French Cafe, which is no longer open. That was in the old market in Omaha. So she knows of the three brothers being the Aquasinos. She also knows that Sam Soda, also reported in her son's abduction, worked at the Stage Door gay bar. And the Stage Door was directly across the street from the downtown police station where Robert Wadman worked at. Ted Gunderson is well known for doing the videos with Paul Bonacci. Paul Bonacci is also fake. In the 80s, the key to breaking open the 80s was Alicia Owen, because she was carrying Chief of Police Robert Wadman's baby as a minor. And so she was the key to break open this. So they sent Paul Bonacci and Troy Bonner. Troy Bonner was a bear boy in Omaha, Nebraska. Larry King and Alan Bear were heavily involved with this. And if you worked for them, you were either known as a King's man or a bear boy. Troy Bonner was a bear boy. Paul Bonacci, nobody even knew where he came from. I did an interview that you can find on YouTube with Michael Brunell. Michael Brunell was sitting right beside Troy Bonner's brother when he was shot in the head. You can hear us have a conversation about Paul Bonacci. Nobody even knew who Paul Bonacci was. He grew up in Omaha. I know that people say, oh, well, those tapes, those interviews that Ted Gunderson did with Paul Bonacci, I will tell you that Paul Bonacci's DID was fake. It was fake. It was right out of Primal Fear and Edward Norton, and we all saw how that movie ended. It was fake in the movie. It was fake with Paul Bonacci. DID does not work the way Paul Bonacci. Okay, let's just be real. DID was meant so that people could be spies and not really know it. If someone like Paul Bonacci came to you, would you tell them secrets? I mean, he was switching flat out personalities left and right. It doesn't work that way. Someone who's suffering from DID, unless you know that person well, you will not be able to see them switch because it's slight. There is a switch, but it is a slight switch. It's not these extreme changes in personality. And so you had the whole thing with Paul Bonacci, and I'll say that with DID, I use this as an example. I helped out at the Seattle Trauma and Dissociation Conference, where it was DID survivors and their advocates, and then a lot of therapists came. And we had a conference for 3 days. And unless the person told you that they were DID, you could not tell the difference between survivors, their advocates, and the therapists, because they just act. That people seem to think that DID is like this extreme case, and it's not. It would never be used in MK Ultra if it was that extreme. You know, you'd be able to pick them out. And so the whole situation with Paul Bonacci was BS, or at least a lot of it was BS. The other thing about Ted Gunderson is that if you remember in the 80s, he did the talk show circuit with Michael Aquino, and they acted like they were friends. I mean, Ted Gunderson never asked Aquino any really hard questions. They were all softball questions, and they worked hand in hand. Now, when I caught Ted Gunderson giving Noreen Gosh information that I had told him, I confronted him. Daniel has been able to tell just recently, since we've gotten to know each other, just as most other people do, is that when I have a problem, I go straight to the source. And I'm very vocal, I'm very outspoken. And so I told him, look, dude, I know you're giving information to Noreen Gosh. I'm telling you stuff and you're ending up telling her. And his reply is that he was an information gatherer and he had to keep all pathways open. And that was enough for me. I didn't trust him. I stopped talking to him. I didn't talk to him because I didn't trust him. But Ted Gunderson, I feel at the very end, did what a lot of them do. When they are young and they are involved with this, they think about their own desires and the next minute and what they want and all of that. But when they get closer to death, that's suddenly when they all of a sudden start considering God and the fact that they're going to be in front of God. My father did the same thing. And then all of a sudden their opinions change, their attitudes change. And I feel that Ted's attitudes started to change at the very end after he was poisoned, because he was poisoned, but he didn't die right away. So I think that Ted Gunderson started to lighten up. I think that the problem that I had with Ted Gunderson, with people that I've talked to that were dealing with him, is that Ted was trying to be all things to all people. And anybody who tries to be all things to all people generally ends up having issues, because nobody can be all things to all people. And so I'm not saying that Ted Gunderson was completely bad at all, but I am saying that at least in the beginning, he wasn't playing on the good side. They were,
And let me just interject real quickly, because some of my viewers may not have watched the first interview I did with you. Just so you guys know, the Franklin scandal was something that happened right in the heart of our country, okay, way back in the 80s. This implicated all the way up to Bush Sr., okay, in pedophilia, child sex, racketeering, trafficking, and all this stuff. And Ted Gunderson was supposedly someone who was exposing all this and exposing Michael Aquino, who was part of the CIA, a really evil guy who used the CIA as a child sex trafficking front. And basically what David is saying is that Ted Gunderson would just give these real softball interviews with Michael Aquino, or even worse, come off looking like this bumbling idiot that didn't really know what he was talking about, where, David can testify he knew Ted Gunderson. Ted Gunderson was not really a bumbling idiot. It was something he was sort of doing because he didn't really want to. And this is what they do, guys. They will bring up controlled opposition because they desperately want to protect this child sex trafficking. And this is exactly what Craig Sawyer is doing down in Arizona right now. He is harassing the VOP, and he's harassing those who are legitimately trying to uncover the child sex trafficking that's going on through the Southwest United States. And Craig Sawyer, appearing like he's on the side of light, is actually part of, he had the police bulldoze and completely cover over a child sex trafficking camp in Arizona. So what Craig Sawyer is doing now is exactly what Ted Gunderson was doing then. And then, like David's saying, as Ted Gunderson sort of approached the end of his life, and we do think he was poisoned, he was like, man, I guess I better start telling the truth. So I just want all you guys to understand the context of this in case you didn't watch the first interview. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, Ted Gunderson and he was no idiot. That's why I had a problem, because I was watching the interviews. I watched, at one point, I ended up watching the interviews on Geraldo and all the other ones. Geraldo is the one that stands out. And he looked like a bumbling idiot. And Ted Gunderson was no idiot. He was very bright.
Yeah.
And so he was controlled opposition. And so he was acting like the hero. But that's what they do, is if they send people in as controlled opposition, they act like heroes. They do tell some truth. I mean, there's some truth to his stuff. There is some truth to John DeCamp's, but they don't tell all the truth. And it's mixed with so much BS that an average person who listens to it is basically going to say, okay, and let's be real. It was Paul Bonacci's DID BS with Ted Gunderson. They got the grand jury in Omaha regarding Franklin to call this a carefully crafted hoax.
Right.
That's what it was called. And it was all in direct relation to what was going on with Paul Bonacci and his weird Edward Norton Primal Fear Act.
Right.
And Ted Gunderson saying what he was saying. And again, Paul Bonacci and Troy Bonner were sent in to silence Alicia Owen. Alicia Owen went to jail for perjury because she wouldn't recant. And she, I think, even as to this day, is known. She is the incarcerated person who spent the most time in solitary. They stuck her in solitary the entire time. She's out of jail now, but when she was in jail, she spent the most time in solitary than any other incarcerated individual in Nebraska. And she was in jail for perjury charges because she refused to say that Robert Wadman didn't rape her as a child.
Right.
And so, what we've seen is that this whole cult of personalities. People hear Franklin, and the first thing you hear is Ted Gunderson or John DeCamp. And it's all these personalities. And I know what I'm saying is not going to be well received by a lot of people, but I am not only speaking from experience, being a victim of what was going on in Omaha. But I knew these men. I knew these men personally. I had personal interactions with them. Same with John DeCamp. John DeCamp worked hand in hand with Noreen Gosh. Somehow or other, because of all of the stuff that they said, Franklin, at least in Omaha and the surrounding area, all became about Johnny Gosh. And Johnny Gosh was a boy who was abducted. He was one of 3 paper boys that was abducted in West Des Moines, Iowa. So something that happened in Omaha, Nebraska got connotated with something in a different state. And Noreen Gosh, I mean, her stories have changed, oh my God, so drastically that John DeCamp has come out and said that her husband at the time, but her ex-husband sent a fake Noreen Gosh and did all this stuff with a fake Noreen Gosh. Noreen Gosh, when I first was involved with her, I was on this Sponge website called the Franklin Files. And that was where I interacted with both Noreen Gosh and Paul Bonacci, all of whom Noreen Gosh acted like she was my best friend for the first 6 months or so, and then just turned on me and started to attack me. I mean, it was horrible. And this is when I was first coming into this investigation. And so I was pretty upset by it. John DeCamp, I constantly called him and tried to meet with him. He would not meet with me. He wouldn't even talk with me on the phone. However, Noreen Gosh decided she wanted to have lunch with me. And then all of a sudden, John DeCamp invited himself to that lunch. And so I met with John DeCamp, Noreen Gosh, and her boyfriend, husband at the time. I don't know who the hell he was. Didn't really care. But it was all, kind of a weird thing. Noreen Gosh telling me that Johnny Camp was in hiding and living on Indian reservations, and that's why nobody knew where he was, which was complete BS. We're talking, this happened in the 80s. We're 30, 40 years later, and no one has come forward and said, yeah, I've seen him as an adult, So I guess, it would be kind of mission impossible, remarkable for him to stay hidden. The only time we've ever heard anything about Johnny Gosh is when Jeff Gannon came forward, that they discovered Jeff Gannon in the White House in the press box. He was the guy that George Bush was giving the first question to all the time. Come to find out, this dude was a male prostitute, had a male prostitution ring. Nobody knew who he was, where he came from. More importantly, nobody knew how he got into the White House. And those questions started to come out. And then all of a sudden, this whole thing about, oh my God, Jeff Gannon is Johnny Gosh as an adult. And so all the questions about Jeff Gannon, of who he was and where he came from, all got covered up. And then all of a sudden it was a focus of, oh my God, is he really Johnny Gosh? Which, no, he wasn't Johnny Gosh. And Noreen Gosh says that Johnny Gosh came and visited her when he was 27. And nobody asked the question of, well, was the dude who came and visited you at 27 years old Jeff Gannon? Nobody even bothered to ask that question. And so there's a lot of this BS all around Franklin trying to cover it up. That's why they're trying to take me out so bad. Because if Franklin gets uncovered, it brings this whole house of cards down, because it was the first case in the 80s that really kind of shined a spotlight into all of this. And so John DeCamp was, he died of Alzheimer's. I didn't cry any tears after he died. I just didn't like him. John DeCamp Franklin was not just John DeCamp's only celebrity case. There were 2 other cases that John DeCamp was heavily involved with. He was involved with the Oklahoma City bombing, and he was also involved with the Columbine shooting. He was involved with both of those. And the Oklahoma City bombing, if you really believe that Timothy McVeigh had the brain capacity to actually put that together and pull all of that off, you obviously didn't see the Timothy McVeigh I saw on television, because the dude obviously did not have the mental capacity to pull that off. And so, and then with John DeCamp, as far as the Columbine shooting goes, I was working at a time with a guy named Doug Millar. And Doug Millar, and there was a boy, I forget his name, but he was a survivor of the Columbine shooting. And his mom, and then this other guy who was involved with exposing Columbine, came with Doug Millar. So I had the three of them at my house. They went to Doug Millar, or they went to John DeCamp. John DeCamp gave them 8 boxes of files. And I personally looked through these files. They were in such disarray that I'm a fairly intelligent dude. If I would have spent 24/7 for a year and a half, I would not have been able to put these files in order. They were worthless because they were so out of order you couldn't make heads or tails out of anything that was in them. And I mean, these were 8 big boxes of files. And so it was just another example of John DeCamp trying to do a cover up. But then John DeCamp also was with Jim Carrey in Vietnam, and in Project Phoenix. I think that's what it's called. But it was a special ops thing to where they were all involved with this secretive CIA BS. And so, but what you find is that, and I'm not dissing his book, the Franklin scandal. I'm not dissing the book. All I'm saying is that there are a lot of inconsistencies. I've read the book. There's a lot of inconsistencies in it. And there's a lot of stuff that got completely left out. And there is no way, being from Lincoln, which is 45 minutes from Omaha, there is no way that the things that got left out. He talked about Satanism, never once mentioned Hummel Park. Hummel Park has had a reputation since the 20s of stuff that was going on there. Never mentioned Hummel Park. Never mentioned the Old Market. The Old Market was where all the child trafficking stuff was really happening, and going on. Todd Beckett is an example of what was going on in the Old Market. He was abducted at 13. In the Old Market, the police refused to do anything. His parents hired a private investigator. This private investigator found Todd Beckett and his abductor in Oregon. If you believe the stories, the dude was raping Todd Beckett at the time they found him. And no charges in Nebraska were ever filed against this dude. I believe his name was Danny Whalen. Danny Whalen might be the investigator. I sometimes get these names mixed up because I obviously wasn't involved. I have talked to Todd Beckett's family and totally screwed him up. He's dead now too. Totally self-destructed, became an alcoholic drug user, just kind of destroyed him. But that's common with guys. We don't survive this abuse as well as women for some reason.
Because I don't think a lot of my viewers are going to know about this. Can you go into more detail about how the Columbine shooting is tied to child sex trafficking and John DeCamp and how that whole thing fits in? Because a lot of people, all they know is that these two boys shot up a bunch of people at Columbine, and they don't know all the. So can you go more into that for my audience?
Some of this stuff, I got into Columbine a little bit because it was involved with John DeCamp. I knew Doug Millar. What had happened is that the police, the 2 boys that supposedly shot up the school, even though the boy who survived, his mother, the boy said that it was more than just those 2 shooting people, that there were cops on the roof and all of that. What precipitated this whole situation is that the cops arrested the 2 boys who were the supposed shooters and anally raped them. And there was actually a police file called it was the boy's name. I don't remember the boy's name, but it was his name.
Harris and Klebold were the shooters, and then are you talking about the survivor, or are you talking
Harris? No, Harris.
Okay.
Harris butt rape. That's a file that the police had that they released to the family. It was called, and it had butt rape in the title, and it was that they had basically been sexually abusing these boys. And these boys, I mean, they didn't react well. They were teenage boys. And yes, they were children because they were teenagers, but obviously they had a lot of anger issues from it, and they couldn't get any justice. And so that's what precipitated the Columbine shooting. And
just so people know, this is what happens with a lot of these shootings, is that these satanic pedophiles that are working on all levels of government, whether it's city, state, federal, they find these people, and it's not just MK Ultra, although there is mind control programming, but it is brutal sexual torture that these people are subjected to in order to literally break them. And we're not trying to abrogate the responsibility. Okay, we're not trying to do that. But what we are trying to show you is that there's a much larger context in which this satanic pedophilia that infests all levels of our government has got to be dealt with, or we're going to continue to deal with these types of horrific shootings that are happening. Go ahead, David.
Well, they're focusing on the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, these boys, they were loners in school. They were known to be loners. So they focus on the most vulnerable and actually get them to explode. And I mean, Westroads in Omaha, Nebraska, perfect example, the Westroads shooting. That boy had a lot of issues. There is talk that he was connected to some of this mind control, and mind control isn't just MK Ultra. I mean, you beat and rape someone, you end up having, in 3 days, they end up getting Stockholm syndrome, or especially a lot of women get Stockholm syndrome. That's mind control. That's when they can control you and your actions and all that. That is mind control. You don't have to necessarily go through Clockwork Orange type experiences to actually have mind control. And so the West Road shooting, the dude broke into Von Mar, shot a bunch of people, and then turned the gun onto himself. And interestingly enough, the reason why the police were able en masse to get to the Von Mar and Crossroads Mall is because George Bush Jr. had just left town from Offutt Air Force Base just a little bit, maybe 15, 20 minutes before, which was interesting all in of itself, because George Bush didn't fly out of Offutt Air Force Base. He flew out, Epley. He flew out of Epley. He generally flew in and out of Offutt Air Force Base, but he was flying out of Epley Airfield, which is where everyone flies out of. That's the air. That's the stuff for the planes, Southwest, and all of that. So he flew out of Epley, and that's how they were able to get a hold of all of this. Now, the West Road shooting has a personal implication in my life, because they released the 911 tapes of that shooting, and the 911 operator talking to the people who actually died during the phone call. And how it hit me personally is that happened to be my niece. My niece was actually the 911 operator.
Wow.
And so she was having to deal with these people who were getting shot and killed. And it's been, for being nobody's boy, my family sure does get caught up in a bunch of mess.
Yeah, well,
And
I think part of it has to do with sort of Yahweh putting you in this position where you can now do so much good in terms of not only exposing the darkness, but also kind of being a voice of comfort to those who have had to go through similar things like this. And help.
And that's the thing about it is that we all have trauma. And trauma isn't a competition. You don't have to go through. I have a lot of people who come forward and say, I was abused, but it wasn't like your abuse. And I always tell them, do not discredit your abuse. Trauma is trauma is trauma. It's not a competition thing. And so we all have trauma and it all matters. And just because someone else, like myself, I went through horrific trauma, that doesn't negate anybody else's trauma. It's not oh, well, you suffered more than I did, so I can't really feel bad about my suffering. We all have our crosses to bear. And, Yahweh is watching out over me. They are blasting the crap out of me right now. But it's because, Daniel, we tried to get this set up, and then I had to, plug in my stuff to get it charged up enough. And so they were aware. I can't even believe they're letting us have this conversation.
Just so you guys know, I mean, literally every time David and I try to call each other, not every time, but a majority of the times, either the phone signal drops, and not just once, but David tried to call me like a total of 3 or 4 times, and literally my phone was always silenced. Now, guys, I use my phone for my regular job all day, never have a single problem with calling anyone. But then when David, so this is a real thing where, people say, well, why isn't Trump doing more? Guys, the swamp is not just in DC, it's all across the nation. And the CIA and a lot of these alphabet agencies, they don't like Trump, okay? They don't like what he's doing. They don't like what he's standing for. They certainly don't want anything to do with how he's cracking down on child sex trafficking. And you guys have to understand the president's not all powerful. We're dealing with some serious, long-standing rogue agencies, and this is common procedure. They don't want the child sex trafficking to end because it's about 100 times more lucrative than even the drug trade, which I talked about in a couple of videos ago. So this is very real. And again, I don't want to have, if I have one comment of people saying that David doesn't know what he's talking about or that he's living in La La Land, I'm going to instantly ban you and remove your comment because I'm not going to tolerate it. So sorry, go ahead, David.
Well, I mean, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I really don't get upset because people, because I mean, if people investigate me or look into me, you're going to realize that I'm kind of on the sidelines with Trump, only because I'm getting hit with these weapons right now. And I've tried to reach out and I've tried to get help. But it's not just Trump. I just don't trust people in power. I despised Obama. The best thing about Obama not being president right now is you can actually say that you despise him and you're not called a racist.
Right.
So that was, and obviously the Bushes I couldn't stand. And I couldn't stand Clinton. Bill Clinton was just because, I mean, the Clinton Foundation, that it goes, we talked about it before. Those emails, everyone says, oh, well, Russia hacked those emails. Well, if those emails were actually hacked, that means those emails are real. So instead of actually focusing on who hacked those emails, why don't we actually focus on what's in those emails, And so but I also tell people I did not vote this last time. I didn't, because I was in Washington. They gave me my voter card. They send out voter cards. That's how it works in Washington, is that they send out voter cards. And I looked at that for a week and a half. It was sat on my desk and I looked at it all the time. Decided I didn't like either one of them. I didn't hate my fellow man enough to vote for either one of them. However, had I voted, I would have voted for Trump because I knew what Hillary Clinton was. And at least I figured with Trump that he doesn't know how things work. And so if he was a bad guy, we at least would have a chance. Where Hillary, I mean, we would be in World War III right now. Oh, most likely a bunch of us would be locked up in camps.
Yeah.
She would have clamped down hard on us. And so when you go in, I'm just on the sidelines with Trump right now because I'm being attacked. I'm watching people like Jenny Moore get murdered, who's an advocate. I'm watching other survivors who are getting imprisoned and getting murdered.
Right.
And so I don't trust, but it's not Trump that I'm against, it's the system. That's what we are fighting. The system was set up. I mean, the fallen had control of us from the minute we walked out of the garden. You know, that if you look back at it, that they said that they could turn mankind completely away from God. And we ate from the tree of good and the knowledge of good and evil. And so God was just like, okay, angels, you have control over them. And mankind, you can do whatever freaking evil thing you want to do. Go ahead, knock yourself out. See what happens to you. And so it's the system that we've been in the system has had control of us from day one. And it's not any better right now. I mean, it's the people who are actually really in control, who have the money, are still in control, and they still have the money.
Yeah.
And so
David and I were just talking about this too, about how, what he's saying is why it's so important to be covered in the blood of Messiah. But, being covered in the blood of Christ is not a euphemism. It's something that, like what David was telling me the other night, this is an active choice you have to make every single day. You have to every single day choose to submit yourself to the Messiah, to submit yourself to his word, to spend time with him, to press in. Because if you don't, exactly what David says, these guys, since the garden, these fallen angels, Satan walks to and fro across the earth, guys. Okay. That didn't change even at the cross. He still has access to the heavenlies where he can accuse the brethren day and night. And he'll continue to have that up until right when the Great Tribulation begins, which is when he gets finally thrown out of heaven and down to earth. And then it's really bad here on earth, much worse than what you think it is now. So what David's saying is really, really key. You have got to make the choice to be covered by the blood of Messiah, to follow him and to love him, or else Satan's going to chew you up and spit you out, especially in the day and age that we're living in. And honestly, a lot of the stuff he's saying about the political situation, I totally agree with. I did vote for Trump, and then I got really kind of skeptical about him because I thought he was about to lead us into a war with North Korea, and I got upset about him sending more troops to Afghanistan, and then firing that missile, that Moab, and I was like, what is going on? And the thing that really turned me around personally, because I was getting really disheartened, was when I saw his 2-year track record of how much he has cracked down on child sex trafficking, that it's actually been more than all modern presidents combined when you look at the numbers. And that's what really heartened me. But, people still ask me things like, well, Daniel, what about the chemtrails? Why doesn't Trump stop the chemtrails? Folks, the chemtrails are controlled by the Department of Defense, the DOD. Do you realize how many satanic pedophiles are in the DOD right now? I mean, it's unbelievable. Trump can't just start firing these people because the media is going to just say, well, he's just this dictator that's starting a coup. So, he is limited in some ways, and this is where we come in. This is where we have to pray. We've got to fast. We've got to do exactly what David's saying, where we got to every day choose to walk in the blood and be aware of these things, because ultimately we're only responsible for what we're going to do. And we can't wait for Trump or Q or anything else. We've got to do what we're supposed to do. And that's why I like how David emphasizes this is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is it's all across the board.
It's across the board. People you can't even imagine are involved with this are involved. And personally, because of what I've gone through growing up as an adult, everything that I've had to deal with, all of the attacks, I will admit I am the harshest skeptic. I'm very skeptical. It is very hard to convince me. And especially now, because we were warned about false prophets. And I know that they send Ted Gunderson, John DeCamp, Craig Sawyer. There's a whole list of them out there and we are feeding into personalities and thinking that the personalities are going to save us. And that's pretty much the reason why I'm very super cautious about going with Trump, because I'm not going to buy into the personality type situation. It's just I'm not saying anything bad about anybody else. I will say that I disagree with people who attack the Trump supporters, because this is the first time ever that I have seen actually mankind get off their butts and do anything. And for the most part, they're Trump supporters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but God has a control over everything. The only one that I seriously trust is Jesus Christ. That's the only one. And you have to submit every day, and it's a conscious thing every day. It's not something that you just do once a week. It has to be something that you do constantly. You wake up in the morning, you go to bed at night, you during the day. And from our last conversation, I did want to say, when people are praying, my suggestion is that when you pray, the first thing you start off with is telling God what you're grateful for.
Amen.
The things that he's done for you that you're grateful, because it says that God loves a grateful heart.
Amen.
And so don't come off and don't just turn to God when you're in need, because that's, again, like I said last time, it's treating him like a fairy godmother. He's not a fairy godmother. He's not going to answer your wishes. Start off and say the things that you are grateful for, and then actually honestly say, these are the things that I need to but the only thing that you can truly control in this life is yourself. That's all any of us can control, is ourselves. You can't control another person. You can't control the governments. Yes, you can vote, but I mean, let's see how far that's gotten us for so long, And so prayer and being involved, bringing in the Holy Spirit and actually living the word every day, consciously living the word, is imperative. It is imperative. And really the only person that I trust is Jesus Christ, because I've been let down over and over and over. Every time I've trusted someone, I get let down. So it's just kind of a safeguard for me, to where, I try to not put myself in a situation to where I'm going to get hurt. Because for me, this whole thing is not my personality. I'm not asking anybody to just take what I'm, like you and I today, Daniel, I said, don't take everything I say as gospel. I'm just an individual. I can't walk on water any more than anyone else can walk on water. I'm just stating my truth, what I know, and how I feel at the time. Those feelings could change. You bring me new information, I start seeing the big people arrested, Podesta and Alphonsus and all of these people that were connected with Pizzagate. When I start seeing that those people are actually in jail and not walking around, being able to do interviews and all of that stuff, then I will definitely sing another tune. But for right now, all I see are low-level individuals. And it's not the low-level individuals that are the problem. Yes, they are the problem, but they're not the heads of this. They're not the ones instrumenting all of this.
You got to hit the top of the pyramid to see it all crumble down. And I totally agree with you. And that's why, I'm eagerly seeing what's going to happen over these next few months with what, Liz Crokin has said and Julian Assange, and we'll see if this stuff bears out. I'm definitely more hopeful than I guess maybe you would be, but I agree with you that let's watch and wait and see, and let's look what happens. I'm coming up.
And also get involved.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big thing, is getting involved. It's not enough to sit back and watch and see. This isn't a movie. You have to get involved in any way. And I can't tell people how to get involved. You have to make those choices for yourself. Just like the discernment. You have to discern for yourself who you trust, who you don't. Always question that discernment, because as new knowledge comes in, it's, and so you have to be open-minded, but you have to work. It's just not enough to sit in your comfy little house and pray. I mean, it's great. I'm not criticizing it, but I tell people all the time, if you see someone starving and homeless, on the street and you go home and pray for them, they're still going to be starving and homeless. You know,
Yeah,
it
faith without
takes.
works is dead, and we need both. We need both the intercessory praying and fasting spirit to prevail against these dark spirits and devils, because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. But at the same time, we also need just as much action and doing stuff, whether it be on the internet or even more importantly outside of the internet, to reach so many people that are still under this hypnosis of the American media, in which none of this stuff is really being acknowledged at all. But I think that if enough of us do that, prayer and action, that the tide can turn, and that's of course what I'm hoping and praying for. I'm actually coming up against a time limit here, but David, again,
I will tell you one thing, just so that I can end with this.
Yeah.
I have seen this come forward and have it gone away over and over. That's the reason why I am so tentative on being, having hope that this will come out. But I will say, this time has been different than any other time I've ever seen, because so many people are educating themselves and becoming involved and becoming concerned and wanting to make a difference. I have never seen a tide like this before. And, yes, I will, I've said that I'm tentative when it comes to Donald Trump, but I will say that had it not been for Donald Trump, all these people getting involved with this child trafficking and that wouldn't have happened.
That's right.
And so I'm not going to say, what is and what isn't. I'm just saying I personally believe that it's all in God's hands, and everything will happen according to God's plan. Like I told you today, nobody can thwart the will of God. And so it's all going to work out. It's just that we all have an individual personal stake in all of this. When we face our maker, and we will each face our maker alone, it will just be each one of us in front of God alone, just the two of us. And we will all have to account for what we did or what we didn't do. And so that's the reason why I get kind of cautious about this whole thing with Trump, because everybody says, oh, well, Trump is going to deal with this. Trump is going to deal with this. This is so big. One person is not going to be able to bring this down. It's too big. It doesn't make any difference who it is, but at least Trump is being honest. We don't have this fake ass hope and change that Obama sold everybody and then just ditched it and dropped bombs on people every damn day. And,
Right.
You don't even want to get me going on Obama, because I don't like Obama.
Yeah, Obama and Bush. I mean, they're basically two sides of the same coin.
They are.
It was 16 years of basically essentially the same policies in slightly different contexts. But yeah, I appreciate that, David. Thank you for those closing words. And like I said, I suspect that based off the last interview I had with you, there's going to be even more questions. So I think probably we'll be doing more interviews in the future. And
one last thing. It was someone who suggested this, and I really liked the suggestion. I want to end in prayer. And the next time that we do this, I want to begin and end in prayer, because I think it's important. When people watch this, they'll just pray right along. And so I would really I know you're on a time frame.
Well, I'm fine with that. What I was cautious about is that, because I know what people will say, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they like to pray in public, and Jesus said, go into your prayer closet and pray secretly, and I'll reward you openly. And so I just didn't want to make a big production of a prayer, which is why I tend to pray in secret a lot. But if you feel led by the Spirit to do that, then I'm certainly not going to say no. And yeah, absolutely.
Well, you have that, but we're not actually doing it so that everybody can see us, because there's also on the opposite end of that same coin, when two or more are gathered in my name.
Amen.
And so you have, I mean, it just gives a chance, and we'll just do it at the end. So those of you who are not inclined to pray, you don't have to. You know, it's not compelling anybody. But I just feel that there were so many people who watched the first one.
Yeah.
And this is Halloween, that we're coming up on Samhain. It's the worst Luciferian holiday of the year. You guys cannot even begin to imagine the atrocities that happen at this time of the year.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
and I'll pray. You don't have to pray. I'll pray.
I'll pray. Let's do it.
Okay.
Good. And by the way, guys, just because David brought this up, we are going to have a whole day of fasting and prayer coming up on this Friday, Thursday night, Friday night, to pray against specifically Halloween. So please, if you can, join us, because we really want to. It is very important that we do this. So, Yahshua, I just come before you, King and Savior. And I ask, Yah, first of all, that you would just rebuke these weapons that are being used against David. I know they can be rebuked, and I just pray that you would just begin to put a shield of protection around him. Because I've even heard how, Henry Groover, he was out in Japan after the earthquake, and he started rebuking these particles, these nuclear particles in the air, and he testifies to that. So this is stuff that you have allowed us to be able to do. So I just pray you would have mercy on David and protect him, because he's been through so much. And I do pray that we would find that balance of both having a prayer life and taking action, not just doing one or the other. Because if we just take action without prayer, we're gonna lose. And if we only pray without taking action, then we're not going to get anything accomplished. So we plead with you. We need you to forgive us and to cleanse this nation and to help us to defeat what seems like an impossible enemy. But we know that with you on our side, we can defeat this stuff, every satanic pedophile. And really what it comes down to is we don't want any more babies or children or teens to be harmed and abused. It's heartbreaking. Please hear our cries. Please stop this. Please let it end, Yahshua. Please show us how we can help your spirit in accomplishing this, to stop this endless sacrifice to Moloch and awaken the sleeping church. They are slumbering and sleeping in the light, and they don't even follow what the scriptures say as they're involved in all their paganism and stuff. How many churches are going to have these harvest festivals on Halloween night rather than trying to fast and pray against all this wickedness that's going on? So we just ask and pray that you would move on the hearts of your people. Go ahead, David.
Father, I just want to say that first I want to start off with how grateful I am that you have woken up so many people. This is a worldwide phenomenon. There are people all around the world who are embracing and bringing within your Holy Spirit. And I am grateful. I am grateful that you are showing me hope in mankind when I have lost it for so long. You really have shown me that people care and that they really want to do something. And I just ask that you help guide all of us, each individually, to let us know what each one of us is called to do. And I appreciate all of the information that's getting out. I appreciate having this opportunity. I know that what I said in this interview will be hard for some people to hear. I just ask that you soften their hearts so that they can at least consider what I'm saying. And also knowing that I am a man, I am not like your son, Jesus Christ. I am not able to walk on water. I'm not able to do miracles. But I am so grateful that you have kept me around, that you have kept me going and safe. These attacks have been hard, not just for me, but for so many others. And yet here I am, still upright, still somewhat conscious and articulate, although sometimes that can be questioned. And I just want to tell you that I'm grateful and that we love you and we know that you are with us. And we are very appreciative of that. And I say these things in your son and our brother's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Okay.
Very good. All right. Thank
God
you.
only knows what the comments are going to be this. And as comments come in, I try not to talk in the comment section because I have a lot of devil lovers who are against me, who seek me out and attack me. But if you get questions that people want answered, I am more than willing to come back on and give what little knowledge I have. You know, sometimes it's just opinions. This time it was personal experience, you know.
Well, that's why I like to interview you, because you're trying to, in the integrity of your heart, to give, as factual of what happened as possible, because you were actually involved, and we want to go straight to the source. So I appreciate you, David. Everyone, thank you for watching. And like David said, if you have any questions, legitimate questions, please put it in the comment section. I will do my best to collect them and get them to David, and we'll just keep doing this and tearing down these strongholds. So
yeah, that's the best thing we can do. It's the information, getting the information out. Discernment is a big thing. Don't take everything I say as gospel. Don't take what anybody says as gospel. The only gospel that you should be taking wholeheartedly is the gospels that Jesus Christ taught. Otherwise, use your levels of discernment to actually figure out how you feel about things. And I'm okay with people who disagree with me. If you disagree and you have a problem, bring it up to Daniel. Daniel and I talk. He'll bring it to me, and we'll discuss it. We'll bring it right on out into the open. I am not infallible. I am a man. I make mistakes. Not all of my opinions are right. I am telling the truth about my experiences, but how I feel or how I think about those experiences is totally my personal take on it. And I don't want anyone to follow me. I just am trying to help with this. Jesus Christ is the one you need to follow.
amen.
And so, hey, thank you, Daniel.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
And I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.